Great. Hi, everybody. We'll get started. Thank you for joining us on this actually really nice sunny day. And my name is Rob Kim, LFS Career Strategist. We have LFS Mentorship people here. We also have Forestry Tri-Mentoring here. So thank you for, again, joining us. We have mentees and mentors all here today to talk a little bit about resumes, and let's get started. So we're going to discuss kind of the 3 levels of resume development. I'm really here in the next hour to give you way more ideas than you need. Part of it is, again, there's so many different strategies out there for resume, and really what I always try to do when working with people is getting people to recognize what is your process, because again, you might say something about your resume and then someone else will say the complete opposite. And so really there's no right answer. If there was a right answer, I'd simply just give you that resume and we'd be done this session. So again, it's really, for me, it's about developing our kind of confidence in our writing and thinking about how we can practice. And again, we're going to have a lot of different ideas, but I have some really great treats for you, some resources for you as well today. So let's get right into it. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that we are on the ancestral, traditional, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. I'm here on UBC, a beautiful day. I think about the term unceded quite a bit again, and this idea of that we are kind of guests on this land that has not been actually given up. There's a lot to kind of reconcile with that, and a little bit of what we can do, I think, is recognize the privilege that we have to be together, even though we're digitally together, to kind of learn, to be able to do that. And so I think all of you try to focus on what is one thing you can take away from today's session. And I think that's, again, a way we can be respectful to the hosts of the people that have been learning here way before when we got here. So a little bit of just, yeah, what can you put in your basket today? All right, so that's, again, I really like thinking about be in charge of your own learning. So my first question to all of you, to get us a little bit started, to get our brains kind of percolating here, are what actions are you taking or have taken towards building your resume? Recognizing that we have all coming from different places, we have all different experiences, and I also want to let all of you not to discount your expertise very quickly. So I'm going to show a little bit on this chat here. Give me 1 second. I'm just learning how to use this. There we go. So I would like you to take a look at the Google Doc that was shared in the link there. Please put that in there. And again, I want to give a quick shout out to Delaney, who is helping me on the back end here. This document here is a resource that you can use later on. So at the end of your session, see this little save as, file, make a copy. Just save that for yourself, and then you have more ideas to come visit when you're ready for some new ideas. This document will give you a lot of them. So if you want to join me on page 2 here, where the opening activity, what actions are you have taken towards building your resume? Select a side there. If you're fighting with some other people, that's all okay. If you cannot access this document, you can even put your comments into the chat here. What actions are you taking towards building your resume? I am going to take care of attending this webinar. That is something, right? So we have how many people on this call? We got 38. I'll put 36. And then once we've populated this document, you can take a moment to actually add in a little +1 to the total there, if that's something that you agree with or you've done in the past. So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to find a spot. I think we have a little bit of a spillover. Should be enough room there. One thing I want to just push all of you to don't overthink this, just add something in here. We again know that the learning research shows that when you're actually writing's the best, but typing's okay too. But when you're actually writing something, whenever you're learning it, that just engages your brain a little bit better. So again, if you can't write anything, put a little +1 down. That will actually help you a little bit too. About 15 seconds or so to keep writing. I'm going to talk while you write now, which I know annoys a lot of you, but we've got to keep the ball rolling here. There's some great ideas here, and there's actually ideas that I will be talking about today. So I like to see some of these things. One of my personal favorites these days is actually keeping a kudos file in my email to track accomplishments. So when I get a nice email or a compliment, I actually have a folder. I call it quantitative, and I just chuck stuff in there. Actually, sorry, qualitative, and I chuck stuff in there. So that's something that I've been actually putting into practice for the last 3 years. I'm big on taking photos of things, screenshots of things. So that's a neat one that people are doing there. Yeah, really sophisticated stuff here. And actually, in many regards, I think our session's over. We can just stop because these ideas are enough and pretty much covers the whole webinar. We did it, everybody. We did it. Okay, so take a moment, put a little +1 there if you again agree or you've done some of these things, and hopefully for all of you today to look at a couple of them and say, yeah, I used to do that, or maybe I should try that again. So again, we're just trying to generate ideas. We cannot solve all your resume problems in this session, but we can certainly get you a little bit more excited, motivated, and interested of like, how do I talk about myself? How do I write my resume? Because it is a chore for most of us, right? And so we don't want this to be a chore. All right, great. And I'm interested to see what the most popular one is. Yeah, LinkedIn Learning. There's some really great modules these days, and UBCV students, I hope you're aware that it is actually free and available to you this year. It's a pilot project. For those mentors, if you actually go to your local library online, that will typically have like lynda.com memberships through your library too. I've used that before. So there's a lot of ways to access that content. Some really great stuff there. What's kind of nice too is if you finish a course through LinkedIn, you can also get that to appear on your LinkedIn profile, which is a nice little added bonus, I guess. Okie dokie. Great. So for today's session, I want to give a little bit of a framing for what we're going to look at. I always like to think about just keeping, like how we're going to kind of keep track of what we're going over here today. So the one that I want you to think about, and I've been using it again in the mentorship orientation, is this EBE. So experiment, be curious, and explore. And I think that's a great way to approach your resume. I think that a lot of people that I work with are always feeling like, oh, I don't know a lot, or they feel like I might be doing something the wrong way, rather than maybe considering like, hey, let's experiment. Let's kind of be curious about different approaches. Let's explore different ways of presenting my material. I think where I get in trouble is when I become either fixed on what I'm doing, like I'm not trying to tweak or have different strategies and approaches to test out, or I just believe that there's one right way. You're going to, again, have people on LinkedIn selling their services and saying that this is the way. There's certainly, I think the better way to approach it is like, look at what works for you, what you think it works for the audience, and then really just kind of believe in it until you decide to change your mind otherwise. It's just an iterative process is the way I look at it. All right. So again, think about EBE as we go through here today. So hopefully, again, you're going to find something that you can experiment with, you can be curious with, and then say, hey, after the session, I want to explore trying to test out what was introduced today. Okay, so oops, that's the wrong one. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at the experiment. And I actually posed this question to LinkedIn. So I said, which of the following approaches would you recommend to your friend to use? So for some of you, if you're kind of like maybe a little bit unsure of some next steps to take your resume, one weird idea you can do, it's not a weird idea, it's a pretty good idea, is to actually pretend that your friend's asking you for some resume advice. Again, when we think about ourselves in third person or dissociate ourselves from the writing process, that is very helpful. So again, maybe in this session, what you're trying to listen for is, hey, what's the one thing that I could actually teach or share with a friend afterwards? Okay, so if you take a look, I kind of posed to people today in this week, like, which of the following approaches are you not using or utilizing? And it was interesting to see people still not really understanding or being introduced to accomplishment statements. That's something new for some people. Building a master career document, which I'll talk about. One idea I've been kicking around is using tables to align our information. So I'm going to show you these 3 ways. And like I said, I have some treats for you. It's disappointing. It's not sweet treats. It's just some templates for you to possibly adapt or just, again, get some better ideas of what you want to do. The key to me here is I don't need you to do it my way, even though I'm going to show you a couple ways that I've been testing things out. It's more like, oh, understanding like, oh, that's what it means to do something like that. How can I adopt that to my current practices, or maybe just tweak a little bit of what I'm doing? All right, so let's take a look at something here. Give me 1 second. Flipping back and forth here. Okay, so the first one is, let's talk about accomplishment statements. So for me, the accomplishment statement idea, if you haven't done accomplishment statements, it's not the best tool, but it is certainly a better tool to try to write about the things that you've done. So typically resumes, most people, the general public, will write what you've done, or it'll be very task oriented. You'll be listing a lot of things. So what you're essentially doing actually is you're writing your job posting or job description of what you've been doing. And really your resume, you're actually trying to write to your audience to say, hey, in this document, I'm trying to convince you that I can do the job that I'm applying for. So accomplishment statements are one kind of step, if you have never written them, to try practicing a little bit more of like giving evidence of what you're capable of doing, or connecting it better to the role that you're applying for. So the easy breakdown there is an accomplishment statement. It has a typical action verb, task, and result. I used to hold a hard, fast rule like having the action verb first and verb, tense, and I've kind of let that go now. I think it's okay sometimes to even have a couple sentences like with an I statement in there. I think you can practice around with it. For me, I'm more fixated in what idea am I trying to showcase, or what piece of evidence I'm trying to showcase to show you that, hey, I can actually do the task on your job description. So if you look at, again, most kind of your bullets, they're typically very broad. So like, for instance, I have their first attempt to conduct face-to-face interviews at different Vancouver locations. So yeah, that's telling me a little bit of what you're doing, but where you might want to consider is like, okay, what's the actual action verb? What's the task, and what's the result? These can get a bit lengthy. So sometimes I might have a really good accomplishment statement as my first bullet. Then I might have some task-oriented ones for the third bullet. I'm going by just banking that most human beings read the first bullet really well, and sometimes your attention kind of peters out the third. It doesn't mean I'm trying to give you like a bad bullet, but sometimes when I'm faced with a crunch, I'm just like, okay, I can still have a really nice task-oriented third bullet, but I really want that first bullet to really capture their attention, to say, look at what I've done. Can't you see me do that for you right now? So again, that's fourth attempt. And notice these are attempts. They're not necessarily better. It's just me trying to write it from a different perspective. So interviewed a total of 700 visitors per week from outside of Lower Mainland. And sorry, I got it cut off here. Utilizing Cantonese and Mandarin. So what I'm trying to convey here is the scope of how many people. So now I'm like 700 visitors. That's a lot, like in a week. So that number there might tell a little bit of a story, and it might provide actually more compelling evidence that I can maybe do the job where the job's asking for some customer service role or something like that. Again, not the best statement, but what I do is I actually play around with that in my document there. Okay, so that's accomplishment statement. If you're at the very bottom of the Google Doc, you will see an example, and we have some links for that Fellini will share later that gives you a worksheet that you can do it. Because again, I'm not here to get you to practice necessarily right now. It's something that you're trying to identify what can you practice after this session. All right, I'm going to show you two more things. And this is the master career document. Give me a second. Why is it not letting me find? Oh, there we go. Okay. So this one here is an example of having a master career document to just organize kind of your stories. And so the thing that I'm more fixated on, I don't really actually care what tool you use. What I'm more interested in is how are you actually explicitly reflecting on your work, capturing that work, even drafting out some of those stories little by little. It's like studying, right? Like we learn pretty quickly after first year, like, yeah, maybe studying the night before all in one night is not as effective as it used to be. And there's no magic to studying, right? It's studies in small chunks consistently every day. It is also the hardest thing to do, right? It's hard to get that consistency. So I'm more interested in like, what is the vehicle that you're using? So this is an example, and this is like really intense, and you don't need to do it this way, but I just want to show you the lengths that some people will go to actually do the work ahead of time on their resumes. So then I'm more efficient and later, and I can possibly turn around my resume. Sometimes you have a short window, right, to give a resume. So I want to try to put in the time before to then increase my efficiency later on. That's one of my tactics. It doesn't have to be yours. So basically, like I will do some stories. I do the CAR method, right? Challenge, action, result. And I will actually just play around with some others. And some of these stories I might not even use. But what I notice when I'm doing this, I'm actually also building false confidence in who I am, what I have to offer. I'm kind of testing out what's good. And I actually sometimes later will work with a friend and they'll say, yeah, that story's pretty weak, Rob, or that one's pretty good, or maybe you need to tweak it that way. And so that's kind of like something that you might want to consider, like how are you capturing that? So that's that tab. The draft idea tab, I mean, I literally will go through a role and sometimes just write some stories. Again, I'll use this for my resume maybe later. I'm trying to get some spark of inspiration or some facts. I'm trying to actually catalog some things that I have right now. So then later on, I can try to pull sort of the best examples to customize for the job I'm applying for. Accomplishment statements, I will sometimes sit down and do like 5-day runs, like I'll write for 15 minutes in the morning, put it on my iPhone, look at it at night, and then I enter it in this document. And then I will actually, and I don't have it here, sometimes I'll even add themes along where I'm trying to like write different versions of the same thing. So I have organized here, I can find different things like and sort with my jobs and roles and companies. And then I'm trying to pull like what I think are some of the best examples for my documents. One other thing I'll do is I'll do a job post matching. So what I'll do is I'll take the job description, I'll plug it into Excel, and I'll start looking at the accomplishment statements that I think best fit that or match or address those job posting descriptions. And then sometimes I'll even tweak my accomplishment statements like that. One last thing that is not resume related, but I do have different things for my LinkedIn where I have different about sections. I have these different bullets because sometimes the bullets I want on my LinkedIn are a little bit different than what I might put on my resume. And so I kind of track that and put all there. And then usually I have a tab of resources where it's either people resources, like actual LinkedIn profiles, information, et cetera, et cetera. This is quite intense. I'm not saying you need to go there, but this is something I certainly have been doing in my career to keep track of just like my stories. Because the worst is, and I've experienced and you've experienced where, sometimes you leave an interview like, oh, why didn't I talk about this thing? Because, if you're doing things last minute, you're just kind of thinking about top of the mind things, and you might be missing out some really rich examples that, obviously maybe were a year ago that you didn't think about in the moment. Okay, so that's the master document. And now I'm going to show you a template, and you'll get both of these today. This template is using a table. So I kind of stumbled onto this idea because I was very frustrated with resumes, when you're like spacing over and you're trying to align things. And so what I've done is I use a table, because then you can actually go into the cell and really tweak it to like left justify, right justify. So you see this, I can align things on this side and this side. I've in this document put a ton of comments in here, so more than what I'm going to go over today. So there's just lots of things in here. And I've given you specific accomplishment statements. They're not great, but I put them in there so you can get a sense of like what's going on here. So what I like about the table is I can, again, really tweak and customize one nice table. So like something like this, see right here, the yellow here, I can go put it down to 2 font, and I can, did it work? Sorry. Oh, I know why. 1 second. Anyway, so it didn't work there, but I can put a 2 font down there and then make that small, color it so I can have a little splash of color. And then at the end, what I can do is I can just click that border styles, and then, where is it? No, sorry, table properties. And then I can just put down no border, and then just kind of hides it and makes it a little bit clean. So once I make one nice table, I can then just copy and paste my bullets in there and my information. And what I really like about it, to customize it, I can actually change my tables around really quickly. Like I could take this UBC one, chuck it on the second page, vice versa. So this is something that you can play around with. And again, this document will share with you. You'll be able to see some considerations on the side. So those are kind of the 3 ideas there. Let me stop sharing there. And so again, accomplishment statements, master career document, and this template. What I'm going to ask you to do right now is back to the Google document, and we're going to go to the table here on page. Well, I don't have my page numbers on here. Maybe I can get you to add some page numbers in a moment. If you go to the experiment part here, I want to give you a second just to peruse some of these. So I talked about 3 things, but I gave you a bunch of other ideas. These are just, again, actually ways to experiment, kind of prepping for your resume, thinking about your stories, organizing things. And so take a look at what I have there. And then at this point, you could unmute yourself and ask any questions if you need some clarifications, expansions on some of these. The STAR method, pause, and PAR, they are at the very bottom of this document, and the T-chart too. So I'll give you a second. Try to select maybe one thing that you'd be interested in doing. We'll see which is the most popular one. There are page numbers at the bottom. I think I said this last time to you too, so thank you. Yeah, we'll try to keep a cumulative total if you can. If you're fighting someone else, that's all good. Just take a moment. And we've linked to the table template there and the master career document, so you can save a copy for yourself later and then just play around with it. Again, I just gave you kind of like a framing. It's not exact it's not maybe the greatest. So it's just, again, something for you to work with and adapt with. Hello. Okay. Give you a couple more seconds to maybe decide and pick one. Again, for you, it's always nice to ask that question, what can I do differently moving forward? So I like to sometimes challenge myself and pick something that's like really kind of outside of my comfort zone. And then that allows me to kind of see like, okay, is this something that I really like? Or I might get surprised with like, oh, that was interesting. I didn't expect that. So again, anytime you can look at your resume in new and novel ways, I think it's really healthy for you. It's a great way to, again, just stay engaged with your work. For me, on my end, I actually really like updating my documents more just to kind of make myself feel good. Like, oh, actually, I have been doing some things, or like I can see what and it also allows me to ask myself, like, what is something that's missing in my work that I want to maybe focus on or add into my portfolio. Okay, thank you, everyone. I appreciate you chiming in there. Okay, so next up, we're going to go to kind of the be curious here. Is I kind of asked this question, what can your friend focus on during their resume writing process? So again, the general public will do things like, hey, spend a little bit of time on the resume, kind of get one resume, you kind of tweak it, and then you just kind of reuse that. I certainly have done that. And you know what? Sometimes it works. I'm looking at, again, kind of leveling up my game. And so again, thinking about what is like, how can I approach the writing process? What are some mindsets that might help me? And kind of like different ways to look at what I'm writing and then what I'm sharing with my audience. So I asked on LinkedIn, just kind of what do you focus on? And the most popular one was reviewing through an employer's lens. And the next one was, is it relevant? So what? So I'm going to talk a little bit about this with you right now. And for me, if we go to the document here, I look at a few of these things, and it's interesting. I had some comments from a whole bunch of people on LinkedIn that kind of matched with some of the ideas that I was actually going to present to you today. One of them, I really like this frame from Adrienne Tom. If you don't follow her on LinkedIn, she's out of Calgary and really, she's a great resume kind of expert, I would say. And I learn a lot from her. I like her kind of style too. So you might want to take a look at her and follow her as well. She gives a lot of free stuff through LinkedIn, of course, because she's trying to drive her business. But the one that I liked is her phrasing was, the resume may be all about them, but it isn't meant for them. And so it means like sometimes we're just thinking about ourselves, like, what do I have? I want to make sure I'm talking about myself. And really, you have to remember that this is a document, is a snapshot of you, and you're trying to write to the employer, right? This document is for the employer. And if you actually look at the majority of the comments and things that were shared, was this idea of, again, thinking about how you're matching to the employer. Okay, so I just want to highlight that one comment there, but I'm going to go show you a real cool way to think about the idea of curation and keyword matching. So I'm going to show you on, give me 1 second. So on LinkedIn, if you go to your profile, there's actually something called a resume builder. And it's not, I don't want to use it to actually build a resume. I like to use it to actually look for keywords that I might be missing both in my LinkedIn profile and also my resume. So for everyone, I'm going to show you on the desktop version here. What you do is you go to your profile and see this more, select more, and see it says build a resume. You can actually do two things. You can actually upload a resume, but I'm going to just take my current profile. So I'm going to hit create from profile. And what's really neat, there's actually a couple things that happen. I'm actually going to learn better titles for some of the jobs in different industries. So for instance, I did look up earlier today, career, like, educator, it didn't really show up. And so that might be a clear indication that I might want to start looking for career services specialists, because that seems like a title that's used on LinkedIn, right? Because they're pulling from their whole database on LinkedIn, from titles to job postings. So I'm going to everyone click career service specialists, and I'm going to hit apply. And what it does, it takes my profile and check out the keyword check. So I did a decent job, right? So it tells me all the keywords that they're finding that are showing up in other people's postings or jobs or profiles of our career service specialist, but I'm missing a few too. So they're suggested keywords. So this might be a way that I might be learning about how the industry jargon is, or the keywords that people are using that, like I might be writing teamwork, but they're actually saying something differently, like they're using like the word collaboration, something like that. And then I can also hit show more, see this, and it will show a couple more words that I might be missing. So I'm not trying to lie. I'm just trying to make sure, am I doing a good job of trying to use industry jargon keywords that I could easily replace that are already in my document, or maybe I'm missing something. So in this case, I'm going to be like, well, nonprofit, that doesn't interest me, but maybe I will start writing, rather than student engagement, maybe student affairs, which is a typical term in the US. So again, we have to understand sometimes what they're pulling from as well. So that's it. I really like that. I use a word cloud too. Sometimes you can take a word cloud. There's free word cloud generators. You take your whole job posting, put it in the word cloud, and then you can see like what are some of the keywords that are coming up to allow you to make some decisions of, hey, what bullets do I want at the top to address certain things in the document? So that's kind of like, again, thinking about your writing process. So just want to, so that's what, we're talking about the jargon. We're talking about, running the keyword matching. And I really like something like my colleague, Logan Lorenz, who works in Sauder, talks about, you need to think about your resume. It's a marketing document. It's not your life history. And so when I get a resume from someone and it's just like really dense and it can be overwhelming, part of it is you have to practice curating your life, which is really hard. You have to make some decisions. But I liken it to, like, again, studying. In first year, we try to memorize everything, and then later on we become a bit more sophisticated, saying what are they testing, what's the learning objectives, what do I need to focus on to then actually be ready for that exam. I think that's kind of similar to writing your resume. Okay, I'm going to be quiet there and let you take a look at some of these ones here. Actually, I do want to talk about two more things. Some of these ones are questions I actually use. So what I get really intense, I go, are my intentions explicitly clear? So I look at what I've written, the bullet, and I say, is it clear? Or I say, does this show that I am going to be good for this job? And I just go, yes, maybe, no. I don't do like, yeah, I kind of see it, because you are writing to an audience where you're competing against, let's say, hundreds and hundreds of other applications. You got to remember, this person might be reading your application as the 20th application, the 20th resume. So how does it really catch their eye? Or how are you helping the reader? Again, I always think about the person reading. Am I helping the reader clearly see how I'm a fit for the role? Not, oh, I can see from these 5 bullets that you're a fit, or I'm going to read more into this. Like, are you writing clearly and explicitly and connecting to the role? That's not easy to do, but that's what I'm trying to aspire to. So again, one idea, it's again a strategy. It doesn't mean it always works. I think about specificity. So if you look at most of our bullets, they're really broad, right? And actually broad doesn't convey trust. It doesn't convey actually evidence that you can do that. So if I just told you like, oh, I'm a good facilitator, and you've never met me, you don't believe me. And maybe, well, some of you might not think this, but how do you think I'm a good facilitator? Well, you see me maybe doing this session, right? That's a different, well, how can I actually try to write that on a piece of document? That's hard. That requires practice, drafting. And, I think that's what I'm trying to get at here. All of this just requires a little bit of work. And I just do a little bit of work, let it be, and then sometimes come back to it. So I'm going to stop talking and let you again take a look at the number 2, be curious. And again, try to focus and select one thing that you actually want to do. And hopefully you can copy and paste that into your calendar or something else, because we want you to take some action after this session. I do want to say one other thing that there is on the table there. I'm a big believer of like screenshotting job descriptions. I like to collect those things because then I can start looking at like, okay, what do other jobs, what are they looking for? What do I have? What do I need to build upon? Or sometimes it's like, what do I need to practice rewriting, which is actually like the relevant skills, but I just haven't written with that lens. So job descriptions to me are like gold because they disappear, right? And especially if there's salary involved or they give like some benefits. For some of you, you might want to start looking for some baselines, which is why like actually public sectors are really good. Like, you know, you can go to Vancouver Sun and see the list of people who've made $80,000 or more at UBC or actually any public institution, right? And you can actually get a sense of like, okay, what is the market? Salaries are a big piece of that. So I just want to, I know it's about resumes, but I think about, again, I'm trying to get a much information that are then I'm connecting to the resume as well. So to me, there's so much information in job postings. Like even if it's not a company or industry you're interested in, make sure you consider screenshotting it. I have a folder of screenshots that allows me to have research, and who knows, I might need to look at it later, but like I said, they disappear and they're gone. So might want to consider that. What's the most popular one here? We got the word cloud. Yeah, I like that one. I've been testing that one out a lot. Write for the job you want, not for the job you did. I like that one quite a bit as well. That's a reminder. I get really intense sometimes, again, with my bullets. I will sometimes write a post-it where it's like, this is what I'm trying to write or address. And then I just like put that on my computer, because when I start writing, I'm suddenly not actually addressing that post-it. So I really like to have some clarity of like, okay, this is what I'm trying to convey. And I continually make sure my bullet is trying to do that. The copywriting one, I know no one selected that. I'm going to stump for that. That's been one of the kind of neatest things I started doing last year, was just like practicing copywriting. I like Bob Bly's book on copywriting. Really allows me to practice being succinct, because that's something, as you can tell, I struggle with. Yeah, just really, I really like applying things from different areas to bring back to the resume writing. So I think marketing and copywriting, those sort of things, because you're trying to sell a product. In this case, the product is you, or you're trying to influence a purchaser. In this case, that's the employer. The copywriting really helped level up my game in terms of both my writing and my webinars and a lot of other things. I wish I had started my, practicing copywriting skills much earlier. That's just me personally. Again, I think you can always look at what can you do better, what can you improve on. There's always always more things to learn. So just pick one thing, try it out for a while, and find something else new. Okay. What time are we? We're at good time here. Give me 1 second. All right. The last one that we're going to go over is this idea of exploring. And so I asked again, how can your friend keep learning about approaches to resume writing, just like what I just was talking about? And so I gave a couple options. Learn from experts on LinkedIn, use LinkedIn Learning. The popular one is adapt from templates, and then apply for jobs. One thing I'm going to talk about real quick is the apply for jobs. I know that's a weird one. And actually someone commented like that seemed like it would be a really labor intensive strategy. But I kind of look at more like from an experiential learning side, and I know how lazy I am. I probably won't learn as much or write my resume as much until I start maybe actually putting my resume out there. I mean, some of you might want to even start considering pick 3 jobs that you see posted, even like ones that you don't actually care about, and just like write a resume to it. I think just practicing thinking about, okay, how is this relevant? And there's just something for me personally of the very active, like really doing it and sending it out there. There's like almost like a little bit more at stake for me to then actually be more engaged with it. So I recognize it is labor intensive, but I think you can actually rapidly work faster and faster. What I'm hoping you're sensing is, again, you're trying to do some of these strategies early to actually create more efficiency on the back end. That's why the master document, writing those accomplishment statements, if you do it right, you should get to a point where you can almost just toss in tons of customized statements that you already have ready to go, and you can actually turn around a resume very quickly. Again, you don't have a lot of time to sometimes apply for these positions, right? It's a few days. And I always like to say life always interferes. Like, yeah, I could write a really good resume if I wasn't going to school, if I wasn't working part-time, I wasn't volunteering, I wasn't cooking, cleaning, etc., sleeping. Like, life always interferes. So I'm always trying to think about how can I create some strategies that allow me to still produce a pretty good resume in a short amount of time. That's something that I like thinking about. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of these. The first one is I want to highlight, and so this is more like kind of tips, and I want to be very careful about the word tips, because tips implies like this is better than something else. So it's like considerations. But the one I like to think about is watching out for this disease I call listitis. And listitis hits us all the time. Like we're very prone to it. And what does listitis look like? You want to look for too many unrelated bullets. Like too many bullets is a signal for a reader to gloss over. And so I like to always say, like, when's the last time you were in class and the prof gives you like some bullets and the 4th bullet appears? Like, when's the last time you actually stood up and started like clapping, saying, thank you so much for that 4th bullet? Like, it is a signal for us to actually zone out. So I think about, if you're going to go to 4 or 5 bullets, they better be really relevant, really, the readers really engaged with them. Because again, we know the research science shows that, 1 piece of evidence is good for your argument, 2 is better, 3 is the best. As soon as you get 4th, your argument dies. So again, I like to think about 3 bullets is kind of like that sweet spot. Again, rules are, they're always meant to be broken, but I also watch out for listitis, a sentence with a lot of commas. So you're saying like, I did this, X, comma, Y, and Z. And what that really is actually conveying to the reader, think about when you see those comma lists, it's a signal to say, oh, this is all one thing. And I'm just going to zone out and maybe kind of gloss over it. And what I really want you to consider is when you're doing the X, Y, Z, what is the actual one idea that you're trying to convey to the audience member, not a multitude of things. And that goes back to curation. Curation means you have to make some judgments on these are the best things I'm going to present to you. And I think it's what you want, but inevitably that means sometimes you're going to be wrong because you're dealing with human beings, right? So that it feels a little bit scary. So a lot of us try to do like, hey, let's just give you everything approach. And that can work too, right? But most of the time it will overwhelm the reader, or the person, the recruiter, or the company reading it will be like, it doesn't even look like a fit, or did they even actually look at this job posting, job description carefully? So there's an example again. Typically when you have listitis, you start giving too much information and it's really broad, it's vague, and then what ends up happening, sometimes the reader actually doesn't even think you can do any of these things because it just kind of, they gloss over it. Okay, so beware listitis. Okay, I'm going to just show you a couple more things here. If you look at, you mentioned, some of you mentioned these things. So to me, LinkedIn Learning, so again, UBCV students, current students, undergraduate students, you can actually access LinkedIn Learning. I think about experts. I mentioned Adrian Tom, but there's so many people who are giving good content. If you want someone younger, like that would be someone like Jonathan Javier. I think about Sarah Johnson. There's like multitude of people. Again, I will stay around a little bit after this session's over, and you can ask me for some pointers. I think of I forget some other names. Serena, I'm going to forget her name. There's a lot of great people who are sharing good information. I think about Amy Miller, who's a recruiter who gives a lot of great info. Adam Broda. You can go on and on. I learn a lot from that community. It's been very helpful for my practice to then share with all of you. The template, I gave you a version. If you go to our career site, students.ubc.ca careers, there's some templates there as well. And then these are just kind of tips and tricks, again, that you might want to consider. So the table format, I forgot to say, I would only use that to make sure that you're actually saving as a PDF, because if you keep the table in Word form, sometimes the applicant tracking systems, they don't read the tables as well. So you want to, and also I always say, try to use a PDF because it will preserve your content and your format, right? The other ones I think about all the time is thinking about your top third of your page as the primetime real estate. So a lot of times we'll bury stuff on the second page if you're using a 2-page resume. And the one thing I really am looking at is, are you including your LinkedIn profile? So the kind of standard practice these days is removing your address, maybe keeping your phone number, your email, and then I would also hyperlink my LinkedIn profile, because anytime I can have something where they click on my profile to see something a little bit more kind of visual, right? Like that's maybe in my favor. So I really want to make sure. And if you're not sure about that, you can look at edit public profile and URL. You click that, you can actually select and personalize that URL and just hyperlink that at the top of your resume. That's a nice added value that some of you can start thinking about, especially if you're someone who does a lot more visual work, or you have a lot of documentations and things that you can showcase. Those are great ways to kind of sneak in some things for someone to see that you can't capture in your resume. I think that's about it there. Probably these days, the popular fonts are Calibra and Arial. So I think about like clean, easy reading fonts. And then, I go with, I'm not a designer, so I'm not going to spend too much on the design. I'm just going to focus on, is it clear and clean, and maybe adding a bit of splash of color. But if you're someone who's like really likes design, then yeah, your strategy, we want to showcase that and showcase those sort of skills. But you have to kind of understand like kind of who you are and what you like doing. I'm going to focus more on like the actual writing content of that. All right, I'm going to allow you to, again, select some of the ideas from here, things that you want to try. And then I have one more thing to do with you. And then, like I said, I will stick around to answer some of the questions that you might have. Yeah, go ahead and pick.
Robbie, you're muted.
Thank you. For those mentors here, you probably will be asked sometimes like, hey, can you take a look at my resume? So one thing, is the kind of the considerations. I think it's great for you to share what you've seen, especially when you've done hiring, giving them insight, but then also make sure you preface to say like, hey, this is my perspective, right? So I think it's really important for students to kind of hear that, because sometimes we might be conveying something, but it's not going to be the way, like it's not the only way. So I think it's really important, again, that you're saying, hey, this is what I'm seeing, this is what you want to consider, but also still allowing for that student to explore, be curious, to experiment on their own, right? So I think it's really nice more when to give feedback is not necessarily sometimes even looking at like the design of it. It's just more like, hey, this bullet, it's actually really clear. This one could use a little bit of work, or what are you trying to say here? So I try to think about that angle, because I meet students every day about resume stuff, and I wish I could just be like, this is the way to do it. It's more like inspiring them and getting them feel comfortable recognizing like what they have. The bigger issue I think for most people is they downplay what they have, or they think, why would I include this thing, this volunteer thing? It has nothing to do with this job. Well, your job is not to discount that. It was important to you. So what's the one bullet that you can maybe connect to show your unique self, to show this is who you are total, to get someone really interested in like, oh, I want to meet this person. I mean, for me, I'm trying to say, can my resume get someone to stop to look at this and say, we want to meet this person? Not necessarily hire, right? We want to meet them. I want to get that interview. So that's, again, all of you mentors, giving that sort of support. I think it's really important to make sure that you're saying these are considerations, because otherwise I think sometimes students feel like they're doing something wrong, and that's not necessarily the case. You're giving your perspective. All right. Last one, if you can help me out here, is actually, what is the most popular one here? Adapt from templates. Great. Okay. So the last thing I'm going to ask you to do is if you can share with me what was one of your takeaways from today's session. So that's, again, page 12 here. And again, as good learning practices show, that when we just do this simple question whenever we're learning in a class, it helps your neurons make better pathways, stronger pathways, and it's a great way to just kind of say, okay, yeah, what's the one thing that I'm taking away? Once you do that, if you could do me a favor, there's a link here at the end, and I'll get Delaney to put that into the chat. If you could take your takeaway and then answer this, and I know it says UBC staff or students, so I apologize. If you're a mentor, you can just select UBC staff, and I'll know what that means. But I'd appreciate if you can share your takeaways with us as well. And I just want to thank all of you for really wanting to learn. I mean, who comes to a webinar at 4 o'clock on a Friday? I think that speaks to your desire to just be, wanting to experiment, be curious, and explore. So I want to acknowledge my gratitude for you showing up and interacting in this format. And like I said, I'm going to stick around for about 5-10 minutes to take any further questions. But again, if you could just do me one favor, click that survey, add your takeaways, it'd be really helpful. And then you can make a copy for yourself so you can refer to this document later. So just make a copy. And again, you'll have tons of ideas in here. And yeah, thanks for joining, everybody. Really appreciate it.